The video you're about to see is our inaugural workshop. We had a group of middle school teachers come here today to the Patricia and Philip Frost Museum of Science in Miami, Florida, local teachers, to learn the best practices to teach evolution and natural selection in their classrooms. We covered the standards, they got teaching materials, and they left here with tremendous knowledge and confidence to teach what can be a very difficult subject sometimes for teachers to teach. And with confidence, with the correct teaching tools, we're going to get better teaching, better understanding in our students. On behalf of the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science, I welcome you here, and I also am very thankful to the Frost Science Museum for hosting us today. So, here we go. Why are we here? You know, as a middle school science teacher, and I know I have some high school teachers here, and you can relate to this, you are a jack of all trades. This year you're teaching meteorology, and next year you're teaching honors physical science, and the following year you're teaching life science, and you cannot be an expert in all of these fields. I'm a very lucky person. I work at a school with tremendous colleagues, and over the years what I've realized is my greatest resource are my fellow teachers. Example, I was a team teacher with someone who loved geology and rocks. I know nothing about geology and rocks. I learned alongside those kids. And when you really know a subject, you teach it better, the kids learn it better, there's excitement, there's passion. And so I thought, what can I provide? What is my expertise? And that would be biology, evolution, natural selection. This is something I really enjoy. It's a field that's changing as genetic research enlightens us on evolution and evidence. So I thought, this is where I can be your resource. First, I'll be going over the 7th grade middle school science standards. High school teachers, there's a lot of good stuff for you, I promise. So here are our standards. These are the Florida Sunshine State Standards, middle school science. As I look at standards across the country, as I'm working for the Richard Dawkins Foundation, I find that there is tremendous overlap across the states. Not all the same, but basically this is the guiding principle of what we're supposed to be teaching in middle school. Okay? So let's break these down. Let's look at these one by one. First one, the scientific theory of evolution is the organizing principle of life science. The famous quote by Dubansky, nothing in biology makes sense except in light of evolution. A lot of times we've been teaching evolution at the end of the year or tucked away in a corner on its own, and really it's the thread, it's the unifying theme that weaves all of life science together. And it really gives the children a big perspective of all of life science and biology. Okay? A scientist said that biology without evolution is just stamp collecting. It's just a collection of unrelated facts. Evolution is what ties all these facts together. So basically, what is it? Well, what makes a theory elegant is a theory that explains a whole lot in one sentence or two, and that is exactly what evolution is. Evolution is a process by which modern organisms have descended from ancient ancestors, and evolution is responsible for both the remarkable similarities we see across all life and the amazing diversity of that life. In a nutshell, that is the theory of evolution. And this is, I want to put this in there because this is my argument against teaching evolution at the back of the book or tucked into the corner. It's so relevant. And really, in order to understand medicine, in order to understand our revolution in agriculture, in our goal to save endangered species, it is very important to understand the basic tenets of evolution. We all understand antibiotic resistance. We understand what's going on in medicine as we realize that bacteria can change over time. The fear of eliminating diversity of crops, for example, potatoes. We have a monoculture. If something goes wrong, if there's a disease, we can wipe out the world's potato crop. So these types of things are very relevant. In taxonomy, we're learning all sorts of things. People are moving animals and other organisms around as we realize what is actually related and what is not actually related now that we have genetic evidence. For example, the hippo And the whales have been put together. It's not artiodactyls and cetaceans anymore. They put these two orders of mammals together. And of course, in biotechnology, an understanding of evolution will lead to biofuels and other powerful molecular tools. So the scientific theory of evolution is supported by multiple forms of evidence. When I get to this part of the year, for me, I tell the children, imagine 1840s, and you think that all species on this earth are immutable. In other words, they are this way, and they've always been this way since the beginning of time. And suddenly, you have explorers and other people, even farmers, tripping over fossils. And what that must have done to the mindset of the people at the time. And so I'm going to go over these point by point, but I really am going to focus on number 7, because I think it's so exciting what's going on in terms of genetic evidence. Kids love fossils. I think if you've been teaching at all, you know that kids love fossils. So the difference, we have, if the impression of the animal is left on a rock, that's called a mold. If, when that animal decayed and washed away, his body was replaced by minerals, that's called a cast. We have amber, and I'm going to leave that section to Carlos, because he knows a lot more than I do about that. One thing, though, a lot of people think it's tree sap. It's actually tree resin. And finally, petrified wood is when the wood itself is replaced with minerals. And those are some of the examples of fossils. Biogeography is one of the things that really made Darwin think about his theory. It's the study of species and ecosystems, not just present day, but over geologic time. For example, Darwin discovered a fossil of a giant sloth in South America. And he realized that the sloth, as he traveled the world, where was it? South America. And he realized, I see that the fossils of these creatures are found in the same place as the modern day creatures are found. And it was one of those aha moments for Darwin when that happened. The next thing that gave people understanding of change over time was the law of superposition. The idea that your older rock is found below, your newer rock is found above, sedimentary, and the lower organisms, fossils found in the rock were, of course, older than the ones higher in the rock. And I do explain to the children the difference between relative and absolute age, and this is the slide that will help you do that. This is one of my favorite resources. It comes from Your Inner Fish, a book by Dr. Neil Shubin. He's at the University of Chicago. He now has a PBS special that you can get on Netflix. So this, Dr. Neil Shubin on his site online has a whole PowerPoint available for teachers. It's a little higher than 7th grade. I use it with my honors biology kids. This is the type of slide you will find on Neil Shubin's site. The kids get it because it's okay, law of superposition, the older stuff is below, the newer stuff is above. But when you say no, listen guys, things with heads, and then things with heads and feet, and then things with heads and feet and fur, and then things with heads and feet and fur and big brains, then they see it in a pictorial fashion and they understand it more. I love this quote. J.B.S. Haldane was known as the Darwin's bulldog. He was a defender of evolution early on. And they said to him, what would make you change your mind about evolution? He said, find me a rabbit fossil in Precambrian rock. And it's never been done. We have never found a fossil in the wrong place, basically. And that's Haldane right there. Artificial selection. This is something that Darwin writes quite a bit about in The Origin of Species. He looked around and he realized that domesticated pigs didn't look like wild pigs. And he saw that, from the wild mustard, we get very different looking crops. Finally, Darwin loved dogs. And he realized that they were all so, that we were selecting for those traits. And if we can select for traits over a short period of time, imagine what nature could do over 3.5 billion years. And now for something really amazing. I'm going to stop and show you 9 minutes of this movie. It's called Dogs Decoded. It's a Nova. What is that? What is that in the picture? Oh, come on. You're supposed to say dog.
Like an Australian Shepherd.
It's a fox. It is a fox, and I'm going to show you the video. This is in the middle of the movie. So this is a part in Dogs Decoded, it's about 35 minutes in, where they explain that dogs are not, you cannot take a baby wolf, take it out of its den and hand raise it. You're not going to get a dog. You got a wolf. So people in Siberia, some scientists in Siberia tried this with foxes.
A remarkable experiment in Siberia may hold the key to understanding how wolves evolved into domesticated dogs. Half a century ago, Soviet scientists set up a breeding program to see if they could domesticate silver foxes. Foxes are closely related to wolves. The project, which has attracted the attention of scientists across the world, is opening a remarkable window on the process of domestication. Here on a farm outside the city of Novosibirsk, the experiment still continues today, overseen by Dr. Ludmila Trut. The breeding program began in 1959 when the first foxes were selected from local fur farms.
We approached the animals in the cages and recorded their reaction to us. We could see that some of the foxes showed aggressive behavior. Others were frightened, but only 1% of them showed neither signs of fear or aggression.
This 1% is selected to become the founding generation of a new population of foxes. At every generation, the selection process is repeated. Only the tamest foxes are allowed to breed. Within just 3 generations, the aggressive behavior begins to disappear.
The radical changes came through in the 8th generation, when foxes started to seek contact with humans and show affection to them. The amazing thing was that cubs who had just started to crawl opened their eyes and started showing affection to humans by breathing heavily, wagging their tails, and howling. This kind of response was a big surprise to us.
Half a century and nearly 50 generations later, the foxes are tamer than ever. It's an accelerated model of how dogs might have been domesticated from wolves. In order to understand the role that genetics plays in the taming process, the scientists also bred a group of foxes to be more aggressive.
No, it just bit my hand. I didn't even open the cage. I just put my hand up, and it managed to bite me through the bars. This isn't a fox, it's a dragon.
This experiment allows researchers to make unique comparisons between tame and aggressive foxes.
We did an experiment with cross-fostering, where we gave aggressive cubs to tame mothers, and vice versa. We found out that the mother's behavior does not influence that of the cub. This cub was brought up by a tame mother.
The results are clear. The difference between tame and aggressive foxes is almost entirely genetic.
We even took the experiment one stage further and transplanted embryos from aggressive mothers into tame mothers. But the results was the same. It proved that you can't change the gene of aggressiveness, and it will be kept and preserved for the next generation.
Geneticists have already located several regions on the fox genome responsible for tameness. They're now taking blood samples from tame and aggressive foxes in an attempt to pinpoint the specific genes. Dr. Anna Kukakova, the scientist leading this research team, makes the 5,000-mile journey to Siberia to study the foxes.
Behavior is complex. We're pretty sure that it will be not a single gene. It's definitely the orchestra of genes which is responsible for this behavior.
One fascinating result to come out of this experiment is the fact that tamer foxes are producing less adrenaline. With lower adrenaline levels, the foxes experience less fear and are less aggressive.
He's like a doggy, you know, like a puppy who's very happy when somebody picks him up from the floor. It's unbelievable how we trust people, and I just really admire these animals.
So within 50 years of our intensive selection process, this fire-breathing dragon has turned into a human friend. If foxes were brought up in a domestic environment, interacting with other animals and humans, they would make fantastic pets. They are as independent as cats, but at the same time, as devoted as any dog could be.
One surprising result of this experiment is that as the fox's behavior changes, so does their physical appearance. Just a few generations into the experiment, scientists noticed a curious phenomenon. The normal pattern and silver color of the coat changed dramatically in some of the tame foxes. Their tails often became curly instead of straight. Some young foxes kept their floppy ears for much longer than usual, and their limbs and tails generally became shorter than their wild counterparts. In effect, the tame silver foxes were beginning to look more like dogs.
What this shows is that when you select against aggression, you get almost all the same suite of changes that you see when you compare dogs to wolves.
Evolutionary anthropologist Brian Hare is visiting the breeding program in Siberia. He believes once you select for tameness, changes in appearance will naturally follow.
I think the surprise when thinking about dog origins is that there's so many ways that dogs are different from wolves. So is it that you had to select for each of these traits individually? Well, the answer from the fox work is no. If you just select for behavior, a lot of the morphological and physiological changes that we see between wolves and dogs, they just get dragged along. You end up with this crazy variance, you know, floppy ears, curly tails, you know, all these other things that are really cute to talk about. So you get a lot of stuff for free when you select against aggression.
For Hare, this wide variety of physical...
Isn't that awesome? Yes. Suzanne, I'd love for you to give us some input. Anyway, that's the surprise. We're going to meet one of these silver foxes at lunch.
Well, it's the marbled Arctic, what you see is the marbled Arctic. And you're going to meet another type of canid. One of the things that they forget to mention is that these are fur trade foxes. Understand that these foxes have never, ever been in the wild. They originally started with the silver phase of the red fox, and they bred them for fur trade. In Russia, they have to have fur. So when people complain, why do you have them and things like that, these can never be released. They have been developed for over 60 years in the Ukraine, and so they don't know how to live on their own, so they were developed for this. I actually have one of the silver foxes that shows the curly tail and the markings. I have several white, marbled Arctic, and that's who's coming today. And understand, they are still wild animals. They show a lot of the dog-like characteristics, but they are still wild animals. You still have to be careful. But they are very friendly, very loving, very curious.
Actually, I want to point out when I showed this video to my students, this is also a very good moment to show the rigor of science inquiry. Because they didn't just take a baby tame fox and put it with a brand newborn with the aggressive fox. They went a step further and took the embryos and transplanted the embryos. And so I really like to show them scientists are not satisfied with, oh, let's just do this for 50 years. No, on top of that, they did more and they did more and they did more. And I think that's a really important lesson across the year to show our kids how science inquiry works and what is expected of science inquiry.